Buying a distressed business is not everyone's cup of tea, but I want you to meet John. He has built an empire out of buying distressed businesses. On this video, he's going to tell you exactly how he did it. If you're serious about buying a business, then take my brand new, completely free training course. There's a link somewhere up here in the corner of the video. Click the link, take the course, and you could be buying a business in the next 100 days. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, tap the notifications bell, and you will receive a notification the next time I release a new video. John, hi.
Hi everyone, how you doing?
How are you?
Good.
So, we first met, I think, in 2018, 2019, around about that.
We went for lunch, didn't we, in 2018? And you convinced me to join the Mastermind in 2019.
So it's all my fault,
it's
right?
all your fault,
yeah. Okay. Because someone yesterday said it was all my fault. So
Definitely your fault.
Yeah. Tell us just briefly the background of yourself, and then so everyone can understand who you are, and then we'll move on to the acquisition, starting with that very first one.
Cool. So I'm John, Managing Director of Northern Telecom, based in Leeds. Northern Telecom started, it's our 10th year this year, when I was unfairly dismissed, shall we say, from a software company for selling telecoms on the side to their customers. So it was probably a fair dismissal, really, but they agreed it was unfair because of the process, and we all learn a huge employment contract lesson from that if you get the process wrong, it costs you money. So never, thankfully, done that mistake. So my former employer was my first investor because they paid us off, and really that's where I started. Having done a law degree, qualified as a lawyer, did 2 years in training, decided that it wasn't really worth what I wanted to do. I went into running my own business from pretty much straight out of university and training. Did marketing for a while, sold that, and then went back into work as a salesman. Finished as a salesman when they unfairly dismissed me and needed something to do, and that's really where we started. We've all been there. We've started a business. It's slow, it's painful, it's hard, and we did that for the first 5 years and grew a reasonable sized business, and then really over the last 3 or 4 years it's accelerated as we've done these acquisitions.
Yeah, it's definitely accelerated your,
in the last 12 months,
growth
certainly.
like crazy, yeah. So, but the first deal that you did had nothing to do with telecoms at all.
So, having done the course in 2019, confident young lad that I was at the time, just turned 30, I can buy any business, we'll see what we can do. Let's go and buy a hotel and golf course out of administration. Why wouldn't you want to own a hotel and golf course? I tell you, 6 months before COVID, that seemed a brilliant idea. 6 months later, it seemed like a terrible idea. And so we bought that from the administrators. It cost us 65 grand. It was a leasehold golf course and hotel, so we didn't own the lease. We turned it round, made it profitable. Everything was hunky-dory. 25 weddings booked in for the year ahead. Combination of the landlord refusing consent to assign the lease because they wanted the golf course back. And then Boris shut the country down on the Monday. Meant we effectively bought a business out of administration, and 6 months later we lost it and had to put it back into liquidation. So we went through the whole journey of an insolvency process in 6 months. First business failure, hurt a lot, learned a lot of lessons. Every insolvency practitioner is I'm not going to say the word, but yeah, we learned a lot from that.
Yeah, okay. I think one of the things you learned was the value of diligence. And however much diligence you do, there's always something that you don't know.
Yeah, the world of insolvency is completely different to everything else that you do. So we've now done 6 acquisitions via pre-pack, excluding the hotel and golf course. And whereas in a normal process you might get a month, 3 months of due diligence to go through, in an insolvency we get 24, 48 hours. We act on gut, we work out what the assets are worth, and that's what we pay. And there are a huge range of things that you just can't guess. The biggest one, and I always tell it, so we walked into the hotel and golf course, second day, get a letter in the post. Congratulations on your purchase, we hope it's successful, but we can't support you. Why, you've got a convicted sex offender working for you. Brilliant. How do we deal with this? Well, you can't go to 35 staff and go, is it you? is it you? Because that apparently is not what HR allows you to do. So we eventually worked out who it was, and his conviction was spent. So from an employment perspective, he'd been there 5-6 years. You can't do anything about it. But then we discovered that not only was he a convicted sex offender, he was on the sex offenders register, and he was on night manager. So he lived on the premises. So our hotel now was the address on the sex offenders register for our main employee. Brilliant news. And of course, all of a sudden, you can't have a prom there for the local school when you've got a convicted sex offender living at the premises. It just doesn't work. And these are the things that you can't plan for when you buy an insolvent business. And I laugh and joke about it now because it's quite a funny story. Inherently, the situation he was in was not. But as a business owner inheriting that, you can't plan for it. You can't do anything about it. We just had to deal with it. He left employment 3 months later as he was effectively managed out the business. But these are just the things that crop up that you just can't plan for. Of course, in a normal due diligence process, we'd probably have discovered that, but potentially not. I can't say the deals that we've done outside of an insolvency process I've ever asked a question about who they employ, to be fair. So maybe we wouldn't have discovered it, but we might have been more prepared. But yeah, on an insolvency, you take your risk, you take your chances, you get what you pay for, and you just have to deal with what you inherit. And every day is a new day in an insolvency transaction.
So would you say that it takes a certain personality type to do this type of deal?
It does. I class myself as a doer. I'm very hands-on. Some staff might say I micromanage a lot, but I inherently understand the financials very, very, very aggressively. I could probably tell you to a pound what is in every single one of our company bank accounts right now. So I'm on the numbers all the time, but I'm also very front-facing. I'll crack on, I'll get on with stuff, and I'll just get it done. Maybe that's to my detriment. I probably take too much on, but these deals are chaotic. They're not planned very well. The staff don't understand what's happened. You've got creditors and suppliers that have all been left out of pocket, and you basically just have to just take it and deal with the flack, deal with the screaming and shouting, manage the employees if there is any, and just try and find the next way forward. And I inherently know that I haven't caused the insolvency. It wasn't me that maybe borrowed too much money or raised the debt or whatever the reason is that it got insolvent. We're there to try and make the best out of an awkward situation, and you can't buy it and be hands off. You just can't, because unless you've got a very good management team, which we do have, but it's still effectively all hands to the pump. We took Tupel PLC private in November, again via a pre-pack administration. That doubled us in size overnight. We inherited 1,600 customers in a day, but we only took 2 members of staff, which at the time seemed like a really good idea. But we soon realised that fundamentally it needed probably 10 members of staff to run the business. And for really since November, it's been chaotic. The pressure on all of our staff has been hard because they've had to all step in and step up to the plate. And we've recruited and we've solved the problems, but you don't necessarily get what you expect. You don't necessarily get what you would want. You just have to suck it up and deal with it. And if you're prepared to take the risk and prepared to do, there are huge gains to make for not a lot of money. But if you want a safe transaction, do not go and buy insolvently. Which is really what we were saying yesterday, wasn't it? That's kind of what we said yesterday. So I enjoy it. I'm tight. I live in Yorkshire now, and I think it's rubbed off on me. It's just the way I am. But if I can buy a business that's worth £1-2 million, but buy it for 100k, buy it for 50k, why would I ever go through the process of trying to do a normal transaction? It takes longer to do because we've got to fanny around with due diligence and negotiate contracts. The process of an insolvency can be 24 hours, 48 hours. I think the longest we've ever been in negotiation with an administrator is a week. So that is from the start of the process of this is potentially for sale, what would you pay us, to congratulations, it's yours, give us your money, off you go. We're talking 7 days at the most. You don't get the time to do the due diligence process that you would potentially like to do. It's all about gut, it's all about feel, and you just have to make a judgment call. I'm interrupting your video with a very important message. If you are watching a video like this,
It's probably because you're serious about buying a business. But watching free videos on YouTube will only take you so far. You need to take the next step. And the next step is a link that's somewhere on the screen up at the top, which takes you through to our free video training. There's no cost whatsoever. You watch the free video training and that will give you some of the essential basics that you need. Now, if you get value from that, then I would invite you to be part of my next Fast Track program. Now, the Fast Track program has been running for a couple of years now. We've had nearly 3,000 people around the world on the Fast Track program, and it's a Zoom program that you can attend from anywhere. It's broadcast from my living room to your living room, where I will teach you what you need to know to go and buy your first business. And there's a Q&A section at the end of each of the training sessions, so you can ask me all of your questions. Now, if you get great value from that and you're really serious about buying a business, then there's my Mastermind program, a 12-month program where we hold your hand through the business buying process so that you can buy your first company. And when you have, I'll invite you into our inner circle, which is exclusively for people who've bought their first business. So that's what we've got lined up for you. It's up to you whether you take the next step. Anyway, back to the video. So the hotel and golf club was almost like an anomaly, wasn't it?
It was an ego purchase. It sounds really good, doesn't it? Oh, I own a hotel and golf course. I mean, it just sounds amazing, and I still think it sounds cool now. But I'm not going to go and buy another one anytime soon because I learnt my lesson. But yeah, it was an out the norm purchase. Yeah. To be fair, we dealt with it and we sorted the problems and it was profitable, but it did very much distract me from the telecom side for a long time. It was the first time I think I ever got to a burnout stage. I think I think a lot of entrepreneurs are very mental health immune. I don't mean that in the wrong way, but I don't have time to be a victim or be sad or moan. I'm so busy, I just have to crack on. And I might feel stressed, I might feel tired, but you know, if I don't get the job done today, there's no tomorrow. Just don't have the time to mess around. And I think the golf club and hotel very much taught me of, you probably do have a max capacity. You know, there is a level that going from you turn up and on one day you'd be hotel and golf course, then you'd be back in telecoms, then we then bought a SaaS company, we bought a text marketing company 2 weeks later. So then I was in a text head, then I was back in the golf club head, and my brain just never switched off. And it taught me probably to stick to what you know and do it very well instead of going out and buying something so out the norm that you have to learn how to run that business before you can operate it. And that was a huge waste of my time, and hence we've stuck to telecoms and IT ever since, and it's been really, really lucrative.
So tell everyone about the deal that you actually did on a Mastermind day in the room.
Yeah, so me and Stephen are sat in a room not much like this. Stephen was also on the course in 2019, and he's looking at this information pack, balance sheets, profit and losses, very scant information really. And I'm looking at my laptop thinking, he's looking at the same thing I'm looking at. Steve, are you looking at this company? Yeah, all right, okay. And so we went through the financials together. It was a SMS marketing platform, effectively all the do you want a loan text messages you get, that was the type of stuff it was sending. Turning over £500,000 a year, so not bad revenue. We sat down, we went out, didn't really do the rest of the course that day. Spent the afternoon on the phone with the administrators, agreed to pay 20 grand for it. I chucked 10 grand in, Stephen chucked 10 grand in, and we bought that together. We ran it successfully. And then about 8-9 months later, it became apparent that having two captains of a ship wasn't really going to work. Stephen and his team were probably picking up more of the work, and therefore he bought us out for 70 grand. So we saw
was that the figure?
7 times return in 8 months for relatively not a lot of work. But yeah, we were just sat together. They were ready to close it down. They weren't going to sell it, so we just offered them 20 grand. And they snapped their hands off. Dealing with insolvency practitioners is a completely different ballgame to a seller. The only thing an insolvency practitioner cares about is how much his fees are and how he gets them paid. That's the only thing that matters. Don't think about how much is an asset worth, how much is something worth. The only thing they care about is how much their fees are. And if you can work that out roughly, or just ask the question, then that's the value of the business, albeit there are other things. If there are big plant with stuff, you might have to pay for it, but inherently an IP just cares about how much their fees are and how much they're going to get paid. And we've worked on that basis ever since.
Because I remember that day very well, because I thought, why do they keep going in and out of the room? The phone kept ringing, kept going out the room, and you were doing the deal.
Yeah, there was phone calls back and forwards. It helped that me and Steve were in the room together. The risk was relatively low because we were only putting 10 grand in each, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot of money. He was in the IT side, so he had a team of software developers in India, so he was able to pick up the software and keep it maintained. I knew all of the end suppliers because of my telecoms knowledge. So, yeah, the deal was done. I flew off to Mexico on the Saturday and then had to get up at 3 o'clock on Monday morning to phone those suppliers and tell them they weren't getting paid. But please, please, please don't switch us off because, you know, we'll pay you moving forward. And one of them was owed about 400 grand. And it was only because of the relationship I had with them that we managed to keep effectively the tap on and the supply of text messages. But yeah, I had to phone them from Mexico because they didn't know it had gone insolvent at that point. But we had to engage with them, let them know, and ensure that continuity of service was there. And then we managed to keep that running, and it's still operating today.
And don't you think, though, coming back to this personality that is required, the type of personality required, to be able to make that phone call to someone who's owed 400,000 and say you're not going to get paid, but yeah, you've got to have a thick skin, haven't you, to deal with a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, I work now really in the world of insolvency. That's where I see best value. Now, I don't cause those insolvencies, and anyone that owns a business in here today, including myself, probably Jonathan, have all lost money when a customer of ours has gone under and not paid their bill. So I understand the pain it can cause, and I get that. What I'm trying to do is try and get some sort of result out, whether it be for creditors, whether it be for employees, that at least gets something to continue that's better than a liquidation. So yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible for the creditors. I understand that. It's not always good for employees because they don't always get to transfer to the new company depending on how a transaction's structured. But I sit there comfortable at night knowing that I haven't caused it. I haven't manipulated the situation. All we've done is buy what was there and try and turn it round. And it is risky. We've sailed close to the wind a number of times, but yeah, you just have to deal with what's in front of you. And what's in front of you is, I'm sorry, but this has gone under. This is where we are. Do you want to work with us, yes or no? Most of the time, especially where it's a big corporate, they're kind of used to it and they'll deal with it anyway. We don't tend to get much pushback from big corporates where they've lost money in insolvency because they're used to it anyway.
Well, they've got it built into their...
Yeah, they built it into their margins.
It's like a bad debt provision.
Yeah, the one we did in November, BT lost £250,000 and the head of legal there didn't even bat an eyelid. He just went, oh, okay then, here's the novation document, sign that, and they just left all the debt behind. And so these guys are kind of used to it.
And I think from hearing you speak, it's part of the sort of the personality type that this suits is where you can disconnect from the emotion of it, yeah. and you see it in a very practical sense. I
think because I've been through both ends of it now, I see it in a bigger picture. You are right that you can't be emotional in an acquisition of any sort because you just pay too much money or you're too attached and you won't make a clinical decision. But having been through the liquidation side of losing a business, I can tell you that was personal. When we lost that hotel and golf course, that hurt. It hurt because we grafted for 6 months. We'd done everything we could, and effectively the rug had been pulled under our feet by a landlord that was refusing to engage because they wanted the golf course back in the family name. So we never stood a chance there, and we grafted, and that was my first ever business failure. And I only comfort now that is when I've driven past it recently, it's in a terrible state. They're clearly not being able to run it, and therefore it's costing them money.
How often do you drive past it?
I think I've been 5 times in 2 years, so not often. But
it's not a daily thing.
No, but thanchankfully it's 100 miles from where we live, so it's not on our doorstep. Okay. But I have driven past it and driven into the car park and got out, and the hotel and restaurant are shut. They're not operating it. They're just operating the golf course side. what a stupid family decision that was, but that wasn't my decision, and I felt for all the staff that lost their jobs in that. We tried our hardest to keep it. But it can be emotional, but you just have to try and take that out as best you can. I think if we compare the experience of the golf club to back in October last year when we bought Ensign Communications. So Ensign was a company based in Bournemouth, was going to be was our second pre-pack of the year. Cost us 50 grand up front, and there was another 50 grand paid in 6 months' time. The recurring revenue that we were supposed to be buying was about 25 grand a month. So looked like a decent deal. We took 5 staff on. Their wage was about 12 grand. So it netted about 3 or 4 grand a month in profit. It wasn't terrible. So we bought that on the Friday. Payday was the following Friday. We got in there on the Monday, and it was very clear that the revenue that we were told and were promised and were due diligenced for wasn't there. It wasn't doing 25 grand a month. It was doing about 7, 8 at best. So we were looking then, we've got 4 days to go before payday. There's a habit here, I don't know why, but I buy a business then go on holiday. It's strange. So I'm in Tenerife in a villa, and poor Simon, my ops director, is down in Bournemouth trying to find a way that we could pay the staff at the end of the week. And it became very apparent very quickly that unless I put more money in, we couldn't pay the staff, which wasn't a problem, but it was the question of, well, what are we going to do next month? Because the staff still need paying next month, but if the income is only 7 or 8 grand next month, there's still a shortfall, and there's still a shortfall, and that shortfall was going to continue. And in that 5 days, we couldn't find a way of generating enough revenue recurring that was going to pay the salaries, let alone pay suppliers. And so 5 days after we bought it, we put it back into liquidation, and we had to make that clinical decision, otherwise it was going to cost us more. And that shows when you take the emotion out of it, you make very clear business decisions, and it was aggressive. It wasn't great. The staff had to be let go, but we had to do that because there was no real way we could actually solve the problems that were in the business. Cost us 50 grand, big lesson learned, but that's the risk that we take. So that was the second failure that we've had. But I'm over it now. There used to be this thing, you've put a company into liquidation, your life's over, your credit's going to be destroyed. I promise you today, no one ever cares. No one's ever asked me. Every so often I have to fill a form in. As a director, ever put a company into liquidation? I have to tick the box and say yes, but no one ever checks these forms because no one's ever asked me since. The banks don't care, lenders don't care. It's not something to be worried about, and therefore I'm prepared to take the risks because I know that I can limit my liability and risk further down the line. So if my risk is what we put in on day one, if I have to limit that in 5 days and stop any further losses, I'm prepared to do so. And that is just the nature of dealing with insolvent companies. They're insolvent for a reason. And you have to try and work out if you can transform that insolvency in a relatively short period of time.
Sorry for interrupting your video, but I wanted to introduce you to a great lawyer in the UK who can get your deals done for you. He's worked for 50 of my Mastermind clients in the last few months alone. His name is John Andrews, and I've got his details right here in my little black book of contacts. You can phone him on 0345 241 2494, or you can email him on johnandrews.deallawyer@jmw.co.uk. If you want someone who can get a deal done, he is your guy. So let's get back to the video.
The risk is higher, but the reward can be high as well. So let's talk about some of those where the reward has been exceptionally good.
Yeah, so I suppose the biggest one is the PLC from last year. So I stood on a stage, like some of you were there, and announced that we'd sold the business or in the process of selling the business to a PLC. I was going to step up and be the youngest CEO on the FTSE, which I need to stop trying to tick boxes on a CV because the golf course was a nightmare and this turned out to be a nightmare. I'm not the youngest CEO on the FTSE, so something went wrong. So we negotiated with this PLC for 6 months. Everything was agreed. They went out to raise the money from the market the same week that Liz Truss decided to destroy the market, which was nice of her. And of course, they then failed in their fundraise. So they couldn't raise the money to pay me. They couldn't raise the money for general cash flow. They effectively became insolvent that week. So I had a phone call, John, we can't raise the money. And I was like, great. So we ended up renegotiating the deal, so it was a lot of paper, bigger risk for me, motivated seller, you know. Sometimes you do things that you wouldn't do. I was prepared to take 80% of it on paper because I believed we could increase the share price and I believed we could do stuff with it. But inherently, we still couldn't get that deal away. A week later, they announced to the market that they were going into administration. 10 days later, we bought it back out of administration. So instead of them buying us and me stepping up and owning 50%, we ended up buying them, and now I own 100%. And so in a really weird way, that whole process turned out for the better because we doubled our business overnight. So from a contractual revenue perspective, so telecoms and IT works in a very much a recurring basis. You pay for your phone line and broadband every month, hopefully, and that's where we see our revenues. So we don't have physical assets. I don't have trucks or cars or anything that I can go and put asset finance on. It just doesn't really exist in our world because everything is digital. So we doubled our recurring revenue overnight for 100 grand. So we went from about 2.5 to 5 million quid for what is effectively the price of a car if you spend 100 grand on a car. But at the time I had a Tesla, so it kind of worked. And so yeah, we got all the benefits of growth, because for us to have added 1,600 customers would have took a year. We'd have had to pay salespeople a ridiculous amount of money, and we got all of that overnight. As a business, we don't have salespeople. We never have and we never will. Our growth now comes from acquisition. I have no interest in paying salespeople because it's hard to train them, it's hard to coach them, it's hard to get them to do what you want them to do. Why do I need salespeople when I can add that level of growth for effectively the salary of those salespeople? Up Telecom that we bought in May, we added 140 customers, 15 grand a month of recurring revenue, cost us 45 grand. So again, could a salesman have sold 100 plus customers and got that revenue in 12 months, which would have cost us the same money? Maybe, maybe not. But I got it from day one with no extra spend. That acquisition with Up Telecom, where I added about 12,000-13,000 pound of revenue, that makes us 10 grand a month. So that'll make us 120 grand this year. It paid for itself in 3 or 4 months. It was just a no-brainer of an acquisition.
So what you're saying then is that these acquisitions give you certainty, despite there being a degree of risk, but when it works really well. I mean, going from 2.5 million to 5 million for 100 grand. For 100,000. Yeah. I mean, that's an incredible amount of certainty, and you're absolutely right. I mean, those of you who've hired salespeople, I mean, it's tough, isn't it? It is tough. It never ends. You're constantly motivating, constantly hiring, constantly firing, and I think, if I'm reading it right, you're saying you just don't want that hassle in your life.
No, we have an account management team, so we look after our current customers really well. I think we do, and our KPIs and our reviews and stuff say that we do. But from a sales perspective, it's just hard work. We have to sell it. There's the first issue. We then have to provision it. So we have to get it ready for installation. We then have to put an engineer on the ground to install it. We then have to train the customer on how to use it. Then we have to bill it. So that can be a 6-8 week process that all costs money, that genuinely isn't being paid for. The customer doesn't pay for all of that. They kind of get it as bundled, and you earn that back over time. Well, if I can drop in 150 or 1,600 customers overnight with no provisioning cost, no installation cost, no billing cost, we bill today, then why not? So the tuple deal we did, which was the big one in November, we negotiated that we got, although we completed on the 11th, I think, of November, and they bill on the 1st of November, we negotiated that we got that month's revenue because we were going to have the on-billing cost. So the suppliers were going to come to us for the money. And so, although we paid 100 grand for it, we then got the benefit of 200 grand's worth of invoices that they'd sent out. So actually, in a weird way, we kind of got it back anyway.
So they sent out the invoices for a service that you were going to be providing.
Yeah.
Which
is just phone lines, broadband. You're very much your generic telecoms.
So you got your 100 back.
Yeah,
off the back of those invoices being paid.
Yeah, there's 350 grand in the bank at the moment for that SPV, and that's just from 3 months of trading. So it just shows that we paid 100 grand for it, and infinitely profitable because we've moved the staff over, so we have taken the 2 staff, they're still with us, but there's no other cost in that business anymore. And now our challenges for that business is we will now go away and we are starting to chip away at the cost. So we'll move services in the back end to our suppliers just to save money. And so the end users will never notice a difference, but we'll start to see incremental cost savings as we go. And that's a long-term process. The problem is we do too many now that we can never quite catch up because we're still doing the Up Telecom ones we did in May, even now, and then of course we've just dumped 1,600 new customers on. So it's an interesting one, but there are significant cost savings to be made. And of course we don't get the pain, we don't get, in that deal, we didn't get the PLC cost, so we didn't get the board of directors, all of that faded away because we didn't want it. We were very, the administrator was very amenable to who did we want to take, how did we want to structure it, and there was only us and one other buyer, so it wasn't very competitive. And on the day of completion, the administrator emailed me a list of staff, and there was about 10 staff, 15 staff on there at the time, and basically went, we can't work out who does what, who do you want? And that's not how it's supposed to be done. But they basically said, well, you tell us who you want and we'll just make the rest of them redundant. And they did. So getting the right administrators is really important sometimes.
So let's talk about some tips then for people who like the idea of this approach.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to everyone about buying a business out of admin?
The best thing I ever did was on the first one, which was the golf club, was I rang our solicitor. So we've got a really good firm of solicitors that we use that I constantly joke, I think to John earlier, that they've kept me out of prison more times than I care to remember. I'm a Scouser, it goes with the trade. But I remember ringing Chris and saying, Chris, I've got a call with this IP, but I've no idea what to ask him. Never done this before. I'm just going to look like an idiot. And Chris was like, right, you need to find out this. So is there consent to assign? Or wasn't that a bloody good question? Because they never assigned the lease. Should have took the hint. But there was a range of questions. So by the time I got to speak to the IP, I had a list of questions. It sounded like I knew what I was talking about and I knew how to approach it. That was gold dust because an IP, all they care about is their fees. And they can advertise a business, they'll get 50 inquiries. The reality is probably only 3 or 4 are ever going to make a bid anyway. And 2 of them are probably going to be unrealistic. So an IP is very quickly going to drill down on, have they done it before? Have they got the money? Are they a time waster? That is literally what they're going to think. And then once they've done all those 3, they're then going to think and go, how do I get my fees paid? Because again, that's all they ever cared about in my experience. The fees is what's important. So you just have to be prepared, understand the situation of what you're going into and be confident. And I look at a lot of insolvency deals. I still look at stuff outside the telecoms industry. I probably look at a new balance sheet and P&L every day. I probably sign an NDA every day. If only because the more you look at, the better you have an understanding of what it is and what it does. I'm very analytical on our financials. I understand where everything is. We're in probably a 10 group company position now. So there's 10 different companies going on. So we have individual P&Ls plus group P&Ls, and it gets quite complicated. But understanding the financials of a business is very easy to do if you understand how a P&L works and a balance sheet works, and where stuff is hidden. And that's a critical one. We look at a lot of software companies where on a P&L basis it's profitable, but then you're looking actually what they're doing is all the software development is sat as an asset on the balance sheet. Well, all right, arguably you could argue it was an asset because it's development time. But from a cash flow perspective, it sits on the P&L really, doesn't it? You've had to pay those developers every day. And the more P&Ls you look at, the more businesses you look at, in whatever sector it might be, the more you'll start to understand them. And I think that's really critical as well. Have a look at your competitors' P&Ls. Go on Company's House and type your biggest competitor in the country up, download their accounts and go through them like a fine-tooth comb. Because I tell you, we've learned stuff by trying to buy businesses where we might not have actually got the deal over the line, but then we've looked and gone, well, why have they done it in a particular way? Prime example, we looked at a mobile phone reseller, so provides people like yourselves with a new iPhone and a monthly contract that goes with it. Couldn't pay their finance, owed Boost £2 million, funny that. and the repayments on it were £80,000 a month, and they couldn't afford the repayment. And we looked at it and couldn't work out how they got the fund to start with. But what they were doing, they'd sell Phil an iPhone, but Phil wouldn't own the iPhone because they'd put it on their balance sheet. So their balance sheet had £1 million worth of mobile phones on it, which is great from an accounts perspective. But in an insolvency process, is an administrator going to ring Phil up and go, Phil, you know the iPhone you're paying 50 quid a month for? Can I have it back? Because I need to sell it because the company's going insolvent. It's never going to happen. But we sat there and said, hold on, if we do that, it makes us more profitable because it's now not hitting our P&L, it's in our balance sheet, improves our balance sheet. And then we started accounting for it in exactly the same way. So now our balance sheet has a huge amount of hardware on that arguably is with our customers, but we own it until the customer has paid down their term of the contract. But we never accounted for it that way in the past. But because of the way we're looking at so much, we're learning as well. And our accountant was like, yeah, you could do it that way, you could do it this way, and was really nonchalant about it and didn't really care. But when you're going for funding, frankly, your balance sheet strength and your P&L strength is what you're after. Well, if I can take 200, 300 grand a year off my P&L and add it to profit and then move it straight to my balance sheet, the funder's going to come in and go, oh, your balance sheet's really strong, you've got loads of asset. Well, have we? I don't know. It's with Phil, he's never going to be giving his iPhone back. But the principle is we're now more profitable at the same time. And we would never have learnt that had we not looked at as many insolvency deals as we have done. And as I said, just go and have a nosy. Go and see what's happening with your competitors, because the information is out there and you'll learn from it. But the other one, as I said, is speak to professional advisors before you approach an IP. Understand the risk, understand what you should be asking, because at least then when you speak to the IP, you sound like you know what you're talking about. It's really important because they are there as a gatekeeper to go, is this person going to pay me? Is he going to waste my time? And getting through that, once you're through that door, life becomes infinitely easier.
And at our last Inner Circle meeting in December, we had Michael, who's an insolvency lawyer, and Brian, who's an insolvency practitioner. And they came along and they answered questions about exactly what John's talking about. And having the right people on the team makes all the difference. This is not a one-person job. You need people you can call on, and they're very specific expertise.
Yeah, I mean, our solicitor, I mean, we're doing 3-4 transactions a year now, so they're fairly well paid, especially given the sale. That sale cost us 100 grand in legal fees. And of course, I've had to pay that, even though the sale didn't transact. But having those people to call on is worth so much. I will ring Chris at any time of day and night just to ask a stupid question, because it might be we're about to do something and I just need to know, am I being sensible or not? And he won't charge me for that because of the relationship that we've now got, because he knows the next deal will come and he'll get paid. But having that sort of professional relationship with decent quality lawyers is really important, because they're the ones that are going to keep you out of trouble. And as I said, Chris has kept us out of trouble.
And you can get into trouble with that sort of process.
If you buy it in the wrong way, if you structure the business the wrong way,
staff.
Yeah, if you don't get the 2P right, there are so many risks involved, and you just need someone practical that can be like, yeah, you can get away with that, or you need to put your offer in this way instead of that way so that you can cut out that type of cost. And you just have to be creative, but you have to understand the game that the administrators are playing is how do they get paid. They'll spin it, it's all about the creditors. No creditor gets paid. The bank might, if they've got a secure charge. HMRC might, if there's any money left. But creditors like you and I, in a normal insolvency process, never get paid in my experience. I don't think, of all the customers that we've had have gone insolvent, I don't think I've ever been paid, and we've had a few. So it's not about the creditors, it just isn't. It's about the administrators. They're a professional services, they're after their fees paying, they're expensive, and that's the game that you have to understand. And if you're prepared to put your money where your mouth is, then there are so many opportunities going to happen this year. I am so excited for 2023 because there's going to be so much opportunity out there for insolvent deals, because everyone that's borrowed money on Sybil's, everyone that's borrowed money on bounce back loans, everyone that's been stressed because of COVID, the pandemic, interest rate rises, energy prices, all of that is going to come together and is going to unfortunately kill a lot of businesses this year. But if the underlying business is solid and you can do something with it, then why wouldn't you buy it? I don't know, a printing company, you might be able to close it down, take the base and move the base back to your operation. So you get all the customers, but you don't have the premises, you don't have the heating costs, the electric costs. These are the things that you need to think about. Can I buy a bunch of customers but have none of the cost? And even if half the customers leave, if you buy it at the right price point, it doesn't matter. We have customers at the moment. Our churn is horrific on that November deal. We've probably lost 100 customers in 3 months. But the reality is, because of the price that we paid and how we structured the deal, just doesn't matter. Let the customer leave. Sorry, bye, off you go. And we're kind of nonchalant about it because we know that we've structured the deal in the right way and we paid the right amount of money for it. And there are so many opportunities going to come up that if you believe that you can turn it around, or you understand why it's gone insolvent and you think you can solve that problem, then honestly crack on.
And on that note, let's give John Graves a massive round of applause. Thank you, John.
Thank you.